Hello there, and welcome to my very first attempt at a YouTube video. I've been creating content since, 2000. But here I am to make some more content as an adult about stupid shit that isn't important at all. But I think it's pretty fun, so we're gonna have fun with this. The premise for this first video came from me thinking about how many fucking video games are made these days and how I feel just completely overwhelmed with the amount of content that I have to sift and decide through each and every day. It's honestly overwhelming. It keeps me up at night thinking about an infinite backlog. In a future video, I'm going to talk about I was cursed by one of these games in my backlog that I failed to complete, but that's a story for another day. But then I started thinking about my experience playing these games and the different ways that video games approach gameplay. And it was kind of the genesis for this video. And today we're going to talk about linear games. I sorted games into 3 different types. These are very large and on a spectrum, so don't think it's an exact fit. But they are linear, open zone, and open world. And I'm hoping to do a video on each of these, but today we're gonna stick with linear. So just like a linear game, I'm not giving you any freedom. You're stuck, and we're gonna follow this main quest line to the end. So get ready for too many cutscenes and escort missions where you're just walking and somebody's with you and it's boring as hell and you're just trying to get through it as quickly as possible. I'm kidding. I'm not gonna bore you here. That's not my intention. I'm here to entertain the people. So let's get into some characteristics of linear games. Linear games are probably the first structure for gaming. Honestly, when you think about it, there's one path forward. There's little deviation. You complete a level, you get to the next one. Finally, you beat the game, get a high score, whatever. And this has a lot of benefits, but also has a lot of disadvantages. Let's start talking about the advantages. The biggest advantage with linear games is probably the ability for the creator to control almost every aspect of the game and the experience. So this raises your floor, but it also lowers your ceiling. Because compared to like a sandbox game where you give someone an open world and people can create their own experiences and adventures, you're crafting every part of it. And if you're a game designer, you're probably more creative than 80% of the population in the gaming community, where they need a guiding hand to give them a great experience. And this is really helpful with crafting a story, creating missions or levels that are fun and maybe provide differing experiences. A great example of this is Uncharted 4, which was one of my favorite games on the PS4. I thought it was one of the best looking games of that generation. And it's like playing a really long movie with the amount of missions and cinematics and differing gameplay. I mean, the game does come down to climbing shit and shooting infinite number of bad guys, but there's also cool stuff like when you're driving the Jeep and it falls off the side of the cliff. It's pretty badass. And games like Uncharted 4, Last of Us, Resident Evil 4, you're playing as a different character, right? You're not supposed to be some generic hero. You're playing as a character that's got their own motivations, emotions, feelings, and you are getting to learn about that character via the gameplay. This is why I feel like most linear games have better stories than more open games, because you just have so much more control. You can control the sequence things happen. You can control the things characters say and do. Whereas with open games, you have to account for so many variables and sequences that it's sometimes harder to get a tight narrative that's satisfying for the player across. I like to think of it like a nice, well-designed amusement park ride. I was just at Disneyland with my girlfriend a few months ago, and we went to Space Mountain, and even though I wanted to puke all over the ride, I still had a great time, and I'm sure the thousands of people that day also had a great time. And that's really what linear games can provide. A guided experience that's satisfying for a lot of players. And let's be honest, a lot of players need that guiding hand when playing games because they just don't have the time or energy to figure shit out in more complicated open games, right? People need that rock star, give me the line to exactly what I need to do for the objective or where to go. And they're like, oh, little piggy, come with me. I'll take you through. Don't you feel good that you completed this mission, even though I told you exactly what to do the whole time? They need that, you know? I need that sometimes. I'm not very smart. I've had to use a walkthrough before. Are you kidding me? The Fire Temple in Ocarina of Time? You're telling me you beat that without... Or hell, even the Forest Temple. I was a dumbass. I couldn't figure any of that shit out. We are absolutely getting off topic. But anyway, linear games are a more refined package in a lot of cases. And you know, sometimes a game that's not as long but is more story-driven is a better experience. When I was a lad, I went camping with this scout group, and someone asked, would you rather have 10 mediocre cookies or one amazing gooey cookie? And one of the campers goes, I'd take the 10. I didn't like that kid. He will not be named, but if you know, you know. And I disagree with that. I think you take the one amazing gooey chocolate chip cookie. And I think that's what a linear game is sometimes. You know, it's just the perfect chocolate chip cookie. It may not be more than, 10 hours, but man, is it a satisfying 10 hours. I feel that way about The Last of Us, actually. That story is just, chef's kiss. The gameplay in linear games can vary quite a bit by the genre. It can be a platforming game, a puzzle game, a shooting game. It can be Demon Souls, where it's just getting your ass kicked over and over and over, and your friends calling you a bitch because the game is difficult, but it's fair, so it's really your fault that you're just getting your ass beat and don't understand all the mechanics. Oh man, I need to do a video on the Dark Souls games, not because I love them, just because of how much anxiety they've given me through the years, for all the people telling me how great they are and me just struggling so hard and not getting into them at all. If you couldn't tell by my gameplay, I'm obviously not a pro gamer, so if that's the type of content you're looking for, you should go elsewhere, because you're definitely not going to be getting it here. Common thread with gameplay in linear games is the lack of what I call returnability, which I don't know if it's an actual word, but it definitely applies to what I'm talking about. It's how easy is it to go back to a place you've already been? And in a lot of cases, if it's in a different level that you've already completed, it's like impossible to get back there unless you use a chapter select and go back to a previous level, or in some cases you have to play the whole game over again just to get back to that level. And because of this, in action-based linear games with levels that have collectibles and secrets, I find the linear framework to be super annoying and inconvenient because it forces me to explore every single pathway in a level. Even if it's a dramatic sequence and I know the path is wrong, I'm going to check every path imaginable because I don't want to miss out on collectibles, because once I leave this level in this area, I'm never coming back unless I do a whole playthrough or chapter select, which, to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of that. On the flip side, linear games provide a much better way to gradually dull out game mechanics than more open games, where it's really hard to determine the pace that a player's going to go. Let's say they're not even acknowledging the main quest line that will give you a new gameplay mechanic or ability, and they're just dicking around. They're not even bothering with the main story. So it's a lot easier to keep things fresh for the player. Uncharted 4 gives you a ton of locations and mission types. You can be scuba diving, or you can be driving a Jeep, or you can climb old ruins or kill hundreds and hundreds of generic bad guys because that's what Naughty Dog likes to do and doesn't want you to think about the moral consequences of your actions, but then they kind of do in Last of Us, and it's kind of confusing. But the main point is that it's a good way to turn up the heat for the player, make things gradually more difficult, and also add in fresh new gameplay and mission types to keep things interesting for the player so they don't get bored of doing the same things over and over and over. One area where linear games fall behind is boss fights, specifically cinematic boss fights. I hate this trend in gaming. The reason I hate it is that these fights look really cool, but they're super unsatisfying to play. In Spider-Man 2 that just came out, not the PlayStation 2 Classic, your very first mission involves fighting Sandman as Miles Morales and Peter Parker, and it has so many damn cinematics. It's like, can I actually play as Spider-Man and not watch Spider-Man do cool shit? I hate quick time events. I hate cinematics. I hate when it's not really even a fight. It's more like you're getting to kind of participate in a movie. It's just not fun at all. To help me compare each type of game against the others, so comparing linear to open world, for example, I created a grading rubric that we're going to be using for this series of videos. And I've got 4 categories: story, collectibles and secret finding, variety in gameplay, and combat. We'll be using a 10-point scale, and we'll be seeing if any of these games will be a super senior because they didn't make the grade and aren't going to be passing. For story, I give linear games a solid 10 out of 10. It's just so much easier to create a gripping narrative when you're using a linear structure. Let's look at Zelda, for example. Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, all of those games have way better stories than Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. I'll fight anybody who says otherwise. They just hit you so much harder. It's so much easier to make an epic tale when you control so many aspects of it. I mean, just look at movie and TV adaptations. The Last of Us just came out recently and was celebrated and critically acclaimed, and that's a very linear story, and I think that's why it made such a great TV adaptation. For collectibles, I gotta give it a 2 out of 10. The frustration of having to explore every single pathway of a level to make sure that you don't miss anything is super frustrating for my OCD compulsive brain. And a lot of times, the things that you do find aren't even worth it, but it's the ability for something you do want to be there that will continually make me search every nook and cranny of a level in any game. Unless the game sucks and I'm just not interested, then I'll just blitz through that as quickly as possible. In variety and gameplay, I'm going 7 out of 10. If it's a good game, it will gradually give you new gameplay mechanics as you're going through and keep the whole campaign feeling fresh. It doesn't have to have a bunch of side quests and mini games like a more open game, and I think there's a place for both. For combat, I'm going to go 6 out of 10. It's really hard to please everybody when you're creating a game with a normal difficulty setting that you want the majority of players to be able to complete, while also satisfying the skilled players who want more of a challenge. It's for this reason that I'm a big fan of secret bosses or optional bosses, which you get in open world and open zone games, where it can create a challenge for the really hardcore players who have mastered the mechanics and want a boss that really tests their skills and really pushes them to their limits, and still keep the main campaign accessible to most players. Linear story games typically have boss fights that are really cinematic, that have a lot of quick time events and cutscenes, and I'm not a big fan of these personally. I think they look cool, but they're just not fun to play, and that definitely was a factor when I came up with my score, looking at you, Spider-Man 2, in that lame Sandman fight. Now it's time to tally up the final score. Linear games get a resounding 25 out of 40, which is 62.5%, also known as a D. Can you pass high school with D's? I don't know. If you're a teacher, let me know this, because I don't remember. I never got a D because I wasn't a dumbass. I did my work and I was on the honor roll, bitch. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm happy about it. I was a nerd. That's why I'm making videos like this. But that's all we got for today. Let me know in the comments if you have any feedback, anything you'd like me to talk about, maybe things you would like me to not talk about. But I will be making more videos. My next one is looking to be a banger. It's going to be a nostalgia hit for me. That's all I'm going to say. It's a game from my childhood. But anyway, that's it for us today. Thanks for watching.